Kakadosh Boker or Masechet Batra Daf Kufnun Amud Aleph 158 says the Gemara. If you remember, we're talking about right now that there was going to be two different ta'anot to do with the Eved. You remember he wrote everything to the Eved. Did he leave over the Eved? So therefore, really, Be'emet, he didn't give anything to the Eved. And he went and he said, "V'amar Rav Dimi bar Yosef Rav Elazar asum taltalin shiur etzel Eved lo asum shiur etzel ketubah." What does that mean? Right? That if right now they come and they made a shiur of karka, which is any amount, right? Why? Because I'm going to say that the Eved was that karka, and therefore, we left the Eved out, and therefore, whatever he gave to the Eved, he goes back to him anyway. So he wanted to do a combina, just that way, he makes him feel good. So the Eved, he feels incredible, everything's written to the Eved, but really, everything's going back to him. But it's not to do with the ketubah, right? What does that mean? Because basically, if somebody's going to write the properties right to his children, and he writes to his wife something, she lost her entire ketubah, but that's instead of the ketubah. Okay? So Rav Yosef comes, and he's going to push off the Abaye, because Abaye just told you that metaltalim, right, are also considered a shiur. So he says, Hatam over there, Bedinhu teloline karka. Really, Be'emet, in the Mishnah, we shouldn't have been writing karka. I did the Tana Reisha, and since the Reisha came in and said karka, right? So therefore, it also said karka, right? But really, Be'emet, it was also metaltalin. It was anything. But just say sometimes we use the same language as they already used beforehand. Okay? So he says, okay, fine. Rabbi Akiva omer, karka kolshu chayevet bepeah uvebikurim. Do you know karka? Doesn't matter the size. You're chayav in peah and bikurim. Lichtov alem pruzbul. It's already enough that you could write pruzbul on them. You have to have right pruzbul on karka. And you could also acquire with this karka properties that do not have achriyut. Yeah, in all these different ways, these forms of kinyanim, which is going to be money, document, and chazakah. So you see from here, the Reisha is talking about things which are speaking about davka and karka, and not in metaltalin. So mishum hachik tani karka. That's what we learn karka. So one more time, if a person has a piece of land, it could be mamash shum davar. We're not talking about a huge acre. No. Mashu katan. The second he's got something katan, peah. What's peah? You have to leave the corner over for the anim. Yeah. Besides peah, bikurim. You had new fruits. You have to bring it right to Eretz Yisrael. You have to bring it to the Bet HaMikdash. Right. Bikurim, the first fruits. Not only that, pruzbul. A pruzbul is only going to be written when you have karka. Right. The pruzbul is during Shemitah. That usually during Shemitah, the 7th year, is going to cancel out your loans. So here, when you write the pruzbul, you're giving it over to the betin, and that you only if you have karka, which means that now you're going to become that you're exempting yourself, right? So he says, right? When you have karka, you could buy properties that do not have achrayut with that karka. Agav the karka. What is that? So he says that's why it's brought to do the concept of karka. So says the Gemara. Are you going to tell me when it says kolshu means any amount? There's no shiur to it, meaning it's be'emet any amount. But now we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Dosa ben Orkinos comes and he says, mane ufras. Imagine right now you're going to have 5 different sheep, and from every single sheep you're going to come and you're going to shear the wool, which is equal to the value of a mane v'chetzi. That's why it says every single one goes up mane pras. Right? What does that mean? So you could take mane v'chetzi. So he says chayav bereshit hagez. You're going to be chayav in reshit hagez. Right? Why? Because each one has chetzi. So here it says the mane is 100 dinarim. So it comes out the mishkal of all the tzemer was going to be 750 dinarim, which is basically 3.2 kilos. Okay, so basically from the 5 sheep, they got 3.2 kilos of wool. So that's already enough to be chayav in reshit hagez. Chachamim come and they say, right? Anything. They didn't say an amount. Anything. You come and you're able to shear. You know what shearing is, yeah? Yeah, you take a wool from the wool. Yeah. So you're going to shear the wool. That's it. You're chayav. And so we asked, what is kol shen? Amarav maneo pras. Uvivad shiu mechumashot. As long as each one, you could take at least a 5th, right, of this mane v'chetzi. So you see from here that even though it used the terminology kol shehen, right, there's still going to be a how do you call this? A measurement, right? A minimum measurement, right? In order to come and to use it. Because that's what it said here. It said, right? So it means even though it did use the terminology kol shehen, it still needed a minimum. Yeah. So says the Gemara, Hatam over there, bedinhu delo lidni. Be'emet, we shouldn't have learned, by the Reshit, I guess, we shouldn't have learned the Lashon of kol shu. I did the Kamar Tana Kama Shiur Rabbi, but since Tana Kama came and he said such a big shiur, which is Maneu Pras, Amar Iunami Shiur Zutra, so he went and he said a very small shiur, right? So Kalli Kol Shu, that's why he went and he said Kol Shu. Meaning the other guy was Magzim, right? I'm calling the other guy, right? Tana Kama basically, right? He was Magzim. So he went and he said, you have to take a Maneh Vechetzi, right? That's a huge amount. So the Chachamim, when they wanted to argue, they didn't say, no, you don't need you just take this. They went and they said, anything. Why? They wanted to take out of the other shita, that the other shita went so high, we freeze al midah, kilu sheomrim, right? Hu halach kol כך gavua, no, al kol shu. Be'emet ze lo kol shu. You still need a midah. But because of the terminology, right, that's what happens. And many times that happens, right? When you're arguing, right? So when you're arguing and things like that, many times when you want to come and you want to take out from the other person, you're going to say, right, the exact opposite of what that person is saying. Okay? Fine. 1 second. So he says like this. Okay? So this is the kol shu. So the Gemara says, Pshita, it's going to be Pshita, Amar metaltele leplania, if he comes and he says the metaltelim are going to be given to a certain person, kol maneh tashmishe kane. So he says that person is going to come and be koneh, all the klet tashmishav of the person that's giving it. Lebar, except for chite v'sare, except for chitim sorim. Why? Because it's not a keli. He said kol maneh. A maneh, right, is a keli. So when he comes and he says all my kelim go to a certain person, it's coming to exclude obviously wheat and barley. That's not kelim. He says kol metaltele leplania. If he says all my metaltelim, my movable objects or my thing there, so then afilu chite v'sare, v'afilu rechaim el yonakana, even the top part of the rechaim. Because the bottom part of the rechaim is connected to the ground, so that's not considered metaltelim. But the top part is metaltelim. So even that is good, except for the bottom part of the rechaim, the bottom part of the windmill. But the bottom part of the windmill, since you can't move it at all, it's not much connected to the ground, so it's not going to be considered metaltelim. Hold the metaltel. If he comes and he says anything which is metaltel, then afilu rechaim etachtonakai. Then even that. Why? Because even though you're not ragil to be metaltel, right? But he says, since he said kol de metaltel, which means at the end of the day you could remove it if you really wanted to, right? So therefore, that's already enough. Okay? Fine. Ibailehu. So they're going to ask the following question. Avda kimekarka or kimetaltel adami? An eved. Is that karka or is that metaltel? Well, let's see. The Gemara is asking the question. So Amar le Ravacha bered Rav Avia le Ravashi. Says Ravacha bered Rav Avia to Ravashi. Tashema, let's bring a proof. Hamocheret ta'ir. If you sell the city, machar et habatim, shechin, me'arod, mechatzataot, right to bet habadin, bet hashechin, aval lo et hametaltalin. Okay, one more time. You sold the city. So imagine, I'm selling you a full city. So what's included in the city? You're going to include houses, the different pits, the bathhouses, wine presses, right? Fields, right? That's a bet hashechin, but they need a lot of irrigation. But you didn't sell the metaltalin. Uvizman shamar, but if he said he vechol ma shebetocha, he said I'm selling you the city and everything which is inside of the city, afilu ayu baem be'ema avadim. Even if you're going to have be'ema and avadim, kula mechurim. Everything's going to be sold. Which one?
It's not metaltalin.
You cannot do anything for that because anyway the house.
1 minute. What are you guys jumping? 1 second. Shwai.
Yeah, but
1 second. Let's one.
They say everything, then it's.
There's a Gemara. Now let's try to analyze this Braita. We didn't even explain the Braita yet. So 1 second. Let's try to analyze. This is a Mishnah, by the way, not a Braita, right? The Mishnah came and said this. We'll learn this above in Masechet Mudalef, right? 68a. So the Gemara says this. If you're going to tell me that be'emet, that avadim are considered metaltalin, that's why in the Reisha, they're not sold. Mishum hachi lo mizabim bereisha. That's why in the Reisha it's not sold. Yeah, why? You didn't mention avadim. So the fact that you didn't say that it's avadim, it's not karka. Ela, but if you're going to tell me that they're considered karka, so why am I lo mizdaven? So why wouldn't it be sold? So Ravashi, he pushes this off. He says, why? Ve'ela, but rather, what are you going to tell me? It's metaltel dame. So maya filu then. Why does it say then, right? If he says, he v'chol ma shebetucha, afilu ayuba be'ema avadim, hare kula mechulin. He says, what's the chidush? I'm saying, obviously, if I say anything that's inside the house, that includes your pots and your pans, and they're metaltalim. But obviously, so if you're going to tell me that an eved is metaltalim, what does it mean even the eved? You said it's metaltalim. Why wouldn't it be even? Obviously, the eved is there, right? So that's what he says. Why maya filu? Ela barada. What are you going to say? He says it's different. Sheshane metaltale denayed, metaltale delonayed. Really, there's going to be a difference between two different types of metaltalim. One that moves, right? And one that does not move.
So the definition of a metaltalim is
I want to say it. So what does that mean? When I come and I'm going to say, Hi vechol ma shebetocha, yeah? So therefore he comes and he says, everything which is inside of it, he says, all the metaltalim that do not go on their own from one place to another place are sold. But be'emot va'avadim, which they can go from one place to another place, right? He says, so therefore, yicholim latzeh minayid, right? They could go out of the city. So therefore, they're not going to be batel, and therefore they're not included in the sale. And that's why the Mishnah had to say afilu, and even kol sheken then the other metaltalim, right? You understood or not? One more time. You had a wrong assumption. You thought that metaltalim means, right? No, metaltalim just means that it's movable. But even in the movable objects, there's two types of objects. You've got a pot. Did you ever see a pot running on its own? No. Right? You have an animal, right? Or you have an eved. So therefore, they're all metaltalim. The only difference is one of them is a metaltalim, which is movable, which means that it goes on its own. And another one is a metaltalim that they don't move. You have to move them. But they're both metaltalim. They're not karka. It's not the ground. So he says, afilu tema kimekarka edame. So now that I just told you this yesod, that there's a difference between metaltalim which move and metaltalim which do not move, now I could say selamim shos the bidyuk otodovar bekarka. So he comes and he says, so therefore I could even say really bemet avadim or karka. So he says, why? He says shane mekarka edenaide mekarka edelonaide. There's going to be a difference between karka which moves and karka which does not move. So therefore, right, there's karka which does not move, right, which is going to be land or real estate. And then there's going to be karka which moves, which is going to be what? Is going to be the eved or bema, whatever it is. So therefore, what he wants to come and he wants to say here is that since there's going to be a difference when you came and you sold the city, right, which is you're only selling the karka which does not move. You never wanted to sell the karka which moves. So therefore, obviously, it wasn't included. So therefore, he disproved and he said, don't bring me a proof that's metaltalim. Maybe it could be karka. Fine. So let's try another one then. Amale Ravina Ravashi. Tashema. Let's bring another one. Remember, whenever we're bringing Tashema, we're trying to be posheta safek. We're trying to answer up a doubt that we have. We asked the question. The question was, is an eved mikarka, right? Or is it metaltalim? And now we're trying to go back and forth to try to bring a proof. What bemet is it? What is an eved? So says the Gemara, Tashema. We're going to try to bring another proof. This is going to be a Mishnah and Masechet Peah that we learned above. Yeah, on Kuf Memtet Amubet. Hakotev kol nechasav le'avdo. If you write all your properties to your eved, yeah, yatsa ben chorin. So obviously he goes up free. Yeah, why? Why does he go up free? Because when you wrote him all the properties, it includes himself. So therefore he acquired himself with his freedom. He liberated him and he acquired his freedom with everything else with it. But he says, Shier karka kolshu. What happens if he left a little bit of land? What happens? Lo yatsa. He doesn't go out ben chorin. Now, 1 second, right? Okay, we didn't even, right? So therefore, Rabbi Shimon says, Lo'olamu ben chorin. He is ben chorin. Ad shioman, until he says, Kol nechazenu until pluni avdi, chutz me'echam and iboshaman. Except for, right, that he doesn't explain what he was mishayed, and therefore I'm going to say that he was mishayed the eved. So therefore, right, he's going to continue now. The Amar of Dimi bar Yosef. Amar Rabbi Lazar says, if you Dimi bar Yosef the name of Lazar, Asu metaltalin shiur etzel eved. Just like if a person comes and he was mishayer karka kolshu, right? The eved doesn't go out. Also, by metaltalin zebediyukotodavar, it's going to be the exact same thing. That if he left some metaltalin, he doesn't go out free. Velo asu metaltalin shiur etzel ketubah, but they didn't need metaltalin by shiur by ketubah. Ve'amale Rav al Rav Nachman. So says Rav to Rav Nachman. My time of what's reasoning? Avda metaltalehu or metaltale metaltale have a shiur. An eved is considered metaltalim, and from one metaltalim to another metaltalim, it's considered a shiur. Which means since he went and he was mishayel latzmo metaltalim, so I'm going to say that he was mishayel latzmo to eved, which he's also metaltalim. Uktuvat isha mekarka. But remember, the ketubah isha is always coming from the karka. It's collected from ground, from land, not from metaltalin. Or metaltalin lekarka lo shiur, and therefore metaltalin to the karka, it's not going to be a shiur. So it comes out that according to Rav Nachman, an eved, right, is be'emet nechshav what? To do with lashon bnei adam, he's considered metaltalin. So therefore, he's metaltalin. That's it. Says in the Gemara Kufnun Amubet 150b. Yeah, Amaleh comes and he says, Anan mishum delav kerut gita matninala. He comes and he says that which we said that they made a metaltalin, a shiur by an eved, right? It's not that be'emet he's considered metaltalin, right? That like what you wanted to say, but rather we are going to learn the reason why. Meaning the reason why it's going to be a shiur b'shtar zeh is because he's not considered karut. He's not considered cut off from his master, right? And therefore he comes and he says through this document, because the shtar shichrur has to completely cut off between him and his master. So since he's leaving something behind, it's not kritut gimura, right? And therefore because of that, there's no difference whether he was meshayer, whether it's going to be karka or metaltalin, right? So one more time, what does this mean? We know there's a concept of a get. There's a get shichrur and get keritut. Get shichrur is an emancipation letter, which is a letter for liberating the slave. And a get kritut is koret beno levena. It's things which are going to cut off the connection, the bond between a husband and a wife. And therefore, he comes and he gives a get. So here, what he's trying to say is that there cannot be a shiur in the kritut. Meaning, when you come and you cut off between a husband and a wife, you cannot come and have something that it's going to be that there's a connection still. There has to be 100%. That's it. So, for example, I'll give you an example. Imagine, this is Shitat Rambam, right? Imagine a guy comes to his wife and he says, right, Arezu gitech, right? This is your get on condition that you're not going to marry, right, a certain person. So now, the second that he comes and she says that, right, and he says, on condition you're not going to get married to a certain person. So the Rambam says it has to be to azman mugbal, meaning it has to be a certain time. He can't just say never, because if he says never, there's still strings attached. Meaning, yeah. So therefore, right? So therefore, no certain time, yes, right? But so therefore, what happens is it has to be azman mugbal. Other shittos say no. Why? Just don't get married to that person. But what's happening? According to him, what he's saying is that there's still some type of a connection. If there's some type of a connection, right, that's it. So the same thing when we're talking about over here, it's talking about that it has to be something which is a krut gita. So therefore, the same thing. He has to be something a krut shtar, meaning that here there's still a connection between them. Fine. Amar Rav Rav Nachman. Says Rav the name of Rav Nachman. So by the way, right, we cannot prove that an Eved Rebemet is considered metaltal. Okay? Fine. Says the Gemara. So basically, what happens is that the Gemara is not poshet the safek, right? Whether be'emet they're considered karka or metaltalin. The Rif comes and he says that since it was not nifshata safek, we could actually bring it from the Gemara above in Kukav Chet Mudalev that it says en govim min avadim, right? Why? Because an eved is considered metaltalin, and that's also the psak of the Rambam and the Rosh. Okay, so it comes out that they're passing that it's considered metaltalin, not karka. But from the beginning of the Sugya Mudalev, right? The Rashbam and others wanted to say, no, that really be'emet. Is it like that? Not like that. Okay, so basically, yeah, there's a machloken. Fine. So Amar Rava, right? Amar Rav Nachman. Yeah. So says Rava in the name of Rav Nachman. Yeah. Yeah. He says Chamisha ad sheyichtevu kol nichsehem. He comes and he says there's 5 people that they give, right? That they give presents. What does that mean? Right? He says, Ad shiichtevu kol nichsehem. Yeah, what does that mean? There are 5 people that they give it, but it's only going to be a present if they give everything. And these are these. Shachiv Mera, Avdo, Ishto, Ubanav, Mavrachat. So now we're going to explain each one. Okay? So let's start. Number 1, Shachiv Mera. What does that mean? The time we learned in the Mishnah, Shachiv Mera shekatav kol nechasav la'acherim. Shi'er kol karka kolshu, matanoto kayemet. Lo shi'er karka kolshu, matanoto kayemet. So you see from here that these notre matanot is only if they gave everything. If they didn't give everything, right? So then no. Yeah, that's what it says over here. And the deen is only going to be until they're going to write all their properties, which means that there's going to be 5 cases, which the halacha is that if a person comes and he writes off all the properties, so the Gemara is going to explain each one in one. Okay, so therefore what we're trying to say, 1 second, let me explain, and then you'll see why it's chamesh. Yeah, so he comes and he says, yeah, so that's why we just said that the deen of Shchiv Mena is only if it's going to come back if he gave all his properties. Okay, so that's the first one, Shchiv Mera. Okay, everyone's with me? That's number 1, Shchiv Mera. Okay, fine. Number 2, Avdo. We just learned it right now. The Tzrana Kotev Kol Nechasav. If somebody's going to come and he's going to write all those properties to his Eved, right? Yatsa ben Chorin, he's going to come out free. Shier Karka Koshu, Lo Yatsa ben Chorin. So therefore you see from here that the concept is only if it's Kol Nechasav, all the properties. That's going to be number 2. Next, Ishto, his wife. Here, if he writes all the properties to his wife, you know what he made her? Into a manager. That's all that he did. He made her into a manager, not anything else. Right? Why? Because that's what we already learned this above in 131a. 131b, he says over here, that basically that he's coming and he's only appointing her into a manager over his properties. Number 4, Banav. Right? She lost, right, her ketubah. So you see from here, right, that the Mishnah is actually talking about, right, that the shtika of the woman, right, is like a mechila on the other nechasim. And therefore, only if he wrote kol nechasav, right, lebanav, right, except for the property that went to the wife. But if he was shier miksata nechasim, that he didn't give them a property, so therefore we don't say that the shtika is a mechila. And why? Because it could be that she could collect the ketubah from there. So therefore we're going to say that then she didn't lose out the ketubah. Okay, and the last one is mivrachat. This is the 5th one. Damar more and more says mavrachat, which means mavrachat nechasea mibala al-yedei. She noted tam ladam acher. Meaning she's running. Mivracha comes from the word boreach, right? They're running away. So he comes and he says, if you're going to do it in a fashion, right, that you're going to give it back to somebody else, and you want the nechasim, right, are going to be yachzirula im titalmeno titgaresh. So basically, he wants that if she becomes a widow or a divorce, it will come back. She has to write all her properties to somebody else. That means she's writing it to somebody else and not to the husband. Okay? So in all these cases, you do see that the halacha is only when it's everything. It's all or none, basically. Right? That's the concept. Okay? Fine. So says the Gemara, uvekulu metaltele have shiur. Right? Did you realize in all these cases, metaltelim are considered shiur, and not only karka, levar mi ketubah, except for the ketubah. Okay, so that means the ketubah was the only one that it doesn't. Why? Because remember that a ketubah is never collected from metaltelim. Okay, so he says the mekarka etakun rabanan, right? Because he says that the reason why is because a woman, the chachamim only instituted the ketubah on karka, the metaltelim lo takinu rabanan, and they didn't do it on right metaltelim, which means all the other cases, right? Metaltelim it's fine. Ketubah is the only one that metaltelim doesn't work because ketubah can never be collected from metaltelim. Okay, you know what metaltelim is? Yeah, your car, your boat, your this. Metaltelim. These are called exactly nothing like that. Yes, with you. Okay, fine. Ameimar Amar. Ameimar comes and he says, yeah. Ameimar Amar. Ameimar comes and he says, metaltele dektive bektubah. When you have metaltelim that is written mefurash in the ketubah, vitniu be'anaihu, and they are still here, right? Havi shiur, it's also considered shiur, which means that let's say he came and he left over, right, metaltelim, right, and so then the woman did not lose the ketubah. Why? Because she was fitting to collect the ketubah from these metaltelim. So therefore, it's keilu he was meshayet karka. So this is an exception to the rule that basically that if the ketubah was going to be written upon these metaltelim and the metaltelim are still around, meaning it's still here, Right? So no, obviously not. So that's it. It's not here. It's not here. But if it's still here, so therefore it's going to be considered a shiur, right? So he says 1 minute. So he says like this. So he says Amar nechasai leplanya, right? So now he comes and he says like this: if my nechasim they go to a certain person, right? Avda ikre nichse. An eved is called nechasim. How do we know that? The Tanam, as we learned in the Mishnah, kotev kol nechasav. If somebody is going to come and write all his properties, lavdo, yatsa ben chodim, comes out free, right? So he says, ara ikre nichse. Ara, land, is also called nechasim. The Tanam, as we learned in the Mishnah, nechasim shesh lo mechru, nikne nechasim shesh lo mechru. Glima ikre nichse. Glima is also called nechasim, properties. The Tanam, as we learned in the Mishnah, shesh lo mechru, and nikne meshicha. So it comes out now. What the Gemara is going to be doing is the Gemara is going to go through an entire list. What is called properties? So I would have thought to say, listen, when I tell you what's properties nowadays, what do we call properties? Land. So you're going to tell me, listen, I've got a piece of land here and a piece of land here. Okay, this one's a house, this one's an apartment, but that's nechasim. The Gemara is saying no. The Gemara says, right, that eved is called nechasim, karka is called nechasim, glima, your jacket, is called nechasim. Zuze ikre nichse. Even money is called nechasim. The time was went to the Mishnah. She'en laim achayu niknin nechasim she'esh laim achayu because of chazaka. He had Rav Papa, just like Rav Papa would replace Rav Zuze. He had 12,000 zuzim. Right, Bechuzai in the house of Bechuzai. Akninu niale. He was makne otam to the Shmuel bar Acha. Right, agav a seifa debita by the doorpost of his house. Kiata when he came, right, nafak lape. He came out ad tavach because he had so much simcha that he brought him back the money. So it comes out that we learn from here the nechasim shel mechriyut or acquired with nechasim shesh mechriyut, which means money is also nechasim. No. אז הוא לא קונה את האישה. What did you say? Yes. לא, זה מה שאנחנו אומרים, זה טעות. נכסים זה לא אדמה. נכס זה property, זה כל דבר, אפילו הגלימה, אפילו הכסף. לא, מטלטלין זה כן זה. מטלטלין זה משהו שמוז, משהו מובו, אבל נכס, you know what I would translate נכס? Not properties. נכס are assets.
המשקפיים שלך זה שלך, זה האסט שלך.
אבל גם אתה יכול להגיד האוטו.
בסדר, אבל כל דבר זה assets. If I'm going to ask you right now, write me down all your assets, you're going to have to write down also your $1 million watch and your $2 million shoes and your thing. You're going to have to write everything down.
Show me the shoes. Show me the shoes.
Huh? You have to drink before, not now. Yeah? Fine. Okay? So he says, that is the concept, right, that we said. Okay? Says the Gemara, Shtara ikre nichse. Do you know that a shtar is also called nechasim? Meaning, one more time, we had eved, we had karka, we had glima, we had zuze, which is money. Yeah, are you guys with me or were you guys? Yeah, one more time. Yeah, and now we have shtar. Shtar is also called neches. The Amar Rabba bar Yitzchak, but says the Rabba bar Yitzchak, shne shtaroten. There's two different types of shtars that we're talking about to do with the sadeh and everything, right? That he didn't come yet, and each one has a different halacha. If he said zechu besadeh zeli ploni, I want you guys to be zoche in this field to a certain person through a kinyan sudan. Vekitvu lo et shtar, and I want you guys to come and to write a shtar. Right now, they came, they did the kinyan, but they didn't give the shtar to the mekabel. So chozer b'shtar, he could still be chozer bo and say that they shouldn't write the shtar, right? Or don't give it to the mekabel. Okay, ve'eno chozer b'sadeh, but he cannot retract and be mevatel the goof of the kinyan on the sadeh. So he could be mevatel the shtar, right? But he cannot be mevatel the actual kinyan on the sadeh, but they be the sadeh, right? Again, one more time, everyone's with me. The guy comes and he says, I want you guys to come to acquire it to Mr. John Doe. So what happens is, let's say Mordechai, Yossi, and Baim, and they're going to come and they're going to acquire it to John Doe. Now, when the time that he told them to acquire it, he also told them, I want you guys to write the shtar. Yeah, so they go to the sofer, so they're going to come here to Ronen, yeah, and they're going to write the shtar. All of a sudden, I could retract. So you know what? No. I don't want you to write the shtar to him. I don't want it to go to John Doe. Now, I could retract, and now they're not going to come and write the shtar. But I cannot retract on the actual kinyan. These two, they made the kinyan. So if they made the kinyan, there's nothing what to do. Understand? The kinyan was done. So he says, "Ve'eno chozer basadeh." If he comes and he says, "Zechu b'sitzu ploni al menat shetichtevu lo et shtar," on condition that you write the shtar, now what happens is the chozer ben b'shtar ben basadeh. You can retract them both. Why can you retract them both? He says because until they don't write the shtar and they don't give it over to the mekabel, so then he's not doesn't acquire it. So the fact that he doesn't acquire because it was on condition. What was on condition? That you write the shtar. All of a sudden, when they're going to come to write the shtar, I stop it. I said, no, don't write it. I'm able to retract. Once I'm able to retract on the shtar, I retract also on the field, because since it was going to be on condition, so therefore that's why it's going to change. The previous one, there was no condition. So Rav Chia bar Avin amar Rav Huna, says Rav Chia bar Avin, right, in the name of Rav Huna, shlosha shtaroten. Meaning like this, according to this shita, there's two, Rabba bar Yitzchak, there's two different types of documents. A document, right, that's what the two different ways of the document, right, even though it didn't come to his hand. And each one has a different halakha. According to Rav Chia bar Avin, there's going to be three. The two that we just mentioned, the idach, and the third one, in kadam mocher v'katav et shtar, right, kiota sheshaninu. What happens right now if I come and I wrote the shtar from the beginning? Okay, even before the kinyan. Until now, what we were talking about, one more time. I'm giving the property to John Doe. I come and I tell two people. Let's keep it the same two people, because not you guys are going to get confused. So I have Mordechai and Yossi. They're going to come and they're going to make the kinyan for me. I have my sofer. My sofer is Ronen. He's going to come and he's going to write the document for me, the shtar. We said in the first two that there's only two types of documents. The first type of document was I told them to make the kinyan, and I told Ronen to write the document, right? The sofer to write the document. The second one was I come and I tell them, make a kinyan for John Doe on condition that you write the shtar and you give him the shtar. In the first case, since there was no condition and it's separate, right? I could come and I could stop Ronen from writing the shtar because he didn't write it yet. So I could stop it beforehand. But you guys already made the kinyan. And once you guys already made the kinyan, I can't retract on the kinyan. The kinyan was done. However, though, if the entire concept was al-minat, which means on condition, right? So then in such a case where it's going to be on condition, as long as it wasn't written and given over, I could retract. And once I could retract on the writing, which is the sofer, I could retract even on the kinyan. Why? Because they only made the kinyan to write the shtar, on condition to write the shtar. If I stopped the writing the shtar, so I stopped the kinyan, because the kinyan was only made on condition to write the shtar.
Concept of signing the shtar?
Yeah, for sure. They always sign the shtar. 1 second. Yeah. So now what happens though is Rav Chia bar Avin comes and he says there's a third one. The two that we just mentioned now, before and after, and a third one. You know what the third one is? What happens if even before these two made the kinyan, I already wrote the shtar. So I went to Ronen beforehand, and I told them, write the shtar. But you always sign. Yeah, you always sign.
He wrote it before.
No, but that's with my command. He's not gonna write a shtar with my command. What? No, you always need to sign it. Unless it's in my handwriting and I'm the one writing the shtar and I'm the one giving it over, I always need a signature. You always need a signature. Okay, so he comes and he says, right? No, not me. I gave it to him. Kadama mocher vekatav et shtar. Right? He went and he wrote the shtar. Right? So he comes and he says, yeah. So he says, Kiota sheshaninu. Once again, Kiota sheshaninu, just like we learned over there, kotvim shtar lemocher, af al pi shen lokeach imo. We're going to write the shtar for the mocher, even though the lokeach is not here. Right? Kivan shechzik ba ze karka. So the second that he's going to make a chazakah on the karka, he's going to acquire the shtar, and that's what we learned. So from here we learn that you're going to have also shtar, which is considered nechasim shelem mechrayut, which is going to be agav the karka. So you see from here that shtarot are also called nechasim. Because when a person comes and he says nechasai leploni, it also considered a shtar. So that means if I come and I say my properties go to somebody, the shtarot which are in my property, which let's say I've got different shtarot, they also go to a certain person. Okay.
תכלס, מה יש שם?